This is a little embarrassing, Wanda. I spent 3 months trying not to be powerful. I literally tried to be more of the team, and I wasted extra energy and time trying to be one of the crew. This very high-powered woman had paid me a beautiful compliment, and I swirled out for 3 months. Had I just simply paused, figured out what the intent was, and then asked a clarifying question, I not only would have saved myself 3 months of time, but I would have absorbed the compliment that she intended it for.
There will never be enough time. And in fact, if you have enough time, I want you to question whether you're in a good role or not. That's just a fact of life. There's always another email, always another conversation, always another read, always a something else.
It just dawned on me, what if you had more hours in your day? What would you do with it? So if you had a 25th hour and you couldn't work or sleep, what would you do?
Anybody who knows me knows that I believe that the quality of the conversation is the game changer. There's your 25th hour. Take that, invest it. You're going to save a boatload on the other time.
The awareness around attempting to reduce every meeting by 10% will drive productivity enormously. And therefore, modeling that behavior and being definitive in meetings are enormous contributors to growth for companies.
Before you go running off down your own swirl path, you've got a moment to say, okay, so what is your real concern here? Or getting the sense that this doesn't land well with you, what is it that you didn't understand? Or any variations on that theme can help before you go into a swirl.
What I teach in the book and what I've been using in my practice for decades now is just
there is no growth in comfort and no comfort in growth. Yet the big leaps are how careers are made and how businesses excel. So how do you master not knowing at all or feeling like an imposter? How do you have the conversations that lead to trust and, of course, excellence? How do you take charge of the things that you can control? How do you thrive outside your comfort zone? That's what this podcast is about. I'm your host, Wanda Wallace, and it's time to get out of your comfort zone. Welcome to the conversation. All right. I'm going to give you 2 facts that I'd like you to consider, and I'm going to call them facts because I think they are facts. One is, if you're in a working role, I'm not talking about your private life, but if you're in a working role that is actually really matters, it's something people care about, then there will never be enough time. And in fact, if you have enough time, I want you to question whether you're in a good role or not. That's just a fact of life. There's always another email, always another conversation, always another read, always a something else. It's fact number 1. Fact number 2, I'm going to again call it a fact because I believe you are wasting more time than you have any idea about. So what we want to talk about today is how do you begin to carve back minutes and hours that are unproductive time. And I'm going to give you the heads up, true for me, we have some tactics. So my guest today is Neal Schore. Currently, he serves as chairman and advisor to a number of notable businesses, business leaders, boards, and companies across the U.S. He's also an advisor to multiple private equity houses and investment firms. He's founder and CEO of the 25th Hour Group, which is an executive coaching and leadership events firm that showcases his toolbox exercise and practices. And before that, he was founder, president, and CEO of Triton Digital, which is a global technology data services leader in the digital audio and podcast industry. Quite a few accomplishments there, a number of noted achievements, like being in the Young Presidents Organization and the recipient of the Ernst & Young 2011 Entrepreneur of the Year Award for Greater Los Angeles. The list could go on. The book we're talking about today, The 25th Hour, How to Thrive and Gain Ridiculous Amounts of Time by Getting Out of Your Own Way. Neal, welcome to the conversation.
Thank you, Wanda. It's such a pleasure to be here. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you today.
So am I. And I have to say, I just love the premise of the book. I also enjoy the book. It's a very easy read. It's got great stories and examples. The takeaways and tactics are very clearly laid out. So couldn't recommend it more. It's easy and exactly what people need when they're feeling stressed.
Thank you. I'm really excited.
Okay. The basic argument, as I understand it, is that we waste a bunch of time being unproductively stewing over things. Somebody makes a comment. That comment, we worry, means the end of the world in some format or another in our lives, and we fret about it. Now, you think you don't fret, but you go home and talk about it. You're still sleeping about it, dreaming about it. You waste hours in the day worrying about it, talking to other people about it, writing emails about it, overthinking the next meeting with that person, and on we go. And I find very few people who are really good at sorting this out. I give one example. I have one person that I've coached who had a very annoying direct report that was driving him bananas and nothing he could do about it. And he made the rule that he would only ever allow that person to occupy at most 10% of his day or week. That's one out of hundreds. So Neal, well, here we go. There's the setup for you. What do you see in your world?
Oh, wow. You really are starting with the juiciest of topics, because I refer to it as the swirl. And for me, it started very early in my career. I had an example where I was a very young manager, 25 years old. I had a staff, I was just recently promoted, and my staff was anywhere from 10 to 15 years older than me. So I was naturally insecure and uncertain about my role and where I fit. And after one of my very first staff meetings, I had this very talented and very high personality woman come up to me afterwards and say, "Neal, you are really powerful." And that set me off on a swirl extraordinaire like you have no idea. This is a little embarrassing, Wanda. I spent 3 months trying not to be powerful. So I'm telling you, I literally tried to be more of the team, and I wasted extra energy and time trying to sit around in people's offices and just be one of the crew. And it was eating me alive. And it's to make a long story short, after about 3 months, I finally went up to her after a next meeting, and I said, "Hey, you got to do me a favor. Help me understand what you meant when you called me powerful." And because I interpret it as a massive insult and a absolute slap in the face, and I was determined to make that different. And she said, "Oh, sure, Neal, easy. You sit tall in your chair. You're very patient and you explain things well. You're always accessible, and I really appreciate that." So here, this very high-powered woman had paid me a beautiful compliment, and I swirled out for 3 months. And had I just simply paused, figured out what the intent was, and then asked a clarifying question, I not only would have saved myself 3 months of time, but I would have absorbed the compliment that she intended it for.
Oh, anybody who's not had that experience, send me an email. I want to hear from you.
Yes, I do too. I'll join you in that. So this happens every day, where someone will make a comment. It could be off the cuff, like "you're powerful," and misinterpreted, or it could be a tone of voice, or certainly an email or Slack or Teams messages. This happens all the time, where battles go back and forth and defensiveness rises, and it's just a huge suck of time. And then we go home and we say to our significant other, "Oh, today was just another horrible day, and I got into this battle," like what you were saying before with your client, the 10% I failed, it was 20% of my day. And all this just uses so much time and energy and erodes our 25th hour.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I still have events, Neal, that 20 years old, I wake up in the middle of the night or I dream about them. They drive me bananas. I mean, I know how to stop that swirl so it doesn't chew up the rest of the day. But at the same time, my goodness, stuff just sits in there and it won't go away.
We have what I love to refer to as our ordinary moments, where whether we're looking backwards, I'm still horrified. And here I'm admitting to a very broad audience, 3 months of swirling, but yet it really happens, whether it's an hour or 3 hours or a day. It's a way that we just don't manage ourselves well to gain that productivity. And we're just giving away time.
Right. I can imagine people say, oh, no, I don't waste that much time on any given event. And while you might not actively let an hour go by where you're pondering it, I promise you that your productivity in the hours immediately after that event is dramatically decreased because I can watch it. I can sit in front of people and see them doing a task and see them slowing down.
I couldn't agree more. They're slowing down for sure. And whether it's like you referenced, the middle of the night wake up or the next morning, and then it's the overcompensation for the what you heard prior. So, okay, I'm not going to directly address it, but I'm going to go out of my way to, like in my case, try not to be powerful. Whatever the scenario is, we weigh it, whether it's the front part of our mind or the back part of our mind, it's there.
Yeah. What was the one I heard most recently? Leader 2 steps above says in a very gruff tone, come by my office this afternoon at 4:00. Right. A leader 2 steps ahead of you says that in a kind of more serious tone. You're going to think for the next 4 hours, oh my gosh, that's it. I'm getting fired. What's the disaster?
Yeah.
And it was really, hey, can you answer this question for me? It's just, but it's all over everywhere all the time, Neal. So, and presumably you call the book 25th Hour so that we find a 25th hour in the day. Is that correct?
When I started my practice just over 20 years ago, I was working with my very first client, and I was very frustrated by the continuous complaining of him and others on his team, where it's just, I don't have enough hours in my day. And it just dawned on me, what if you had more hours in your day? What would you do with it? So if you had a 25th hour and you couldn't work or sleep, what would you do? And that was the beginning of a significant amount of that same question being asked to clients over different industries and different stages and ages, etc. And it was almost consistent where that hamster wheel effect, where we're just in the constant churn and grind, and where we just don't have time. And I teach people to have time. And so it became almost by default my headline. So one client would refer me to a potential other client, and they would say, oh, Neal's going to teach you how to find your 25th hour. And they said, well, what's a 25th hour? And so it became somewhat of a calling card. And so therefore it felt very natural to name both the book and my firm the 25th Hour and 25th Hour Group.
I love it. And what you're hitting on there with that 25th hour is not more things to do, not more execution, but some restorations, some planning, some thoughtfulness, all of which is essential if you're going to have impact, as opposed to just having a bunch of check marks of things you've accomplished or done, rather not accomplished at the end of the day.
Absolutely. Many of my clients are wildly accomplished leaders, wildly accomplished executives. So their resume, their pedigree, their experiences are phenomenal in almost every case. They have yet, when I meet them, they have yet to master how to manage that extra hour, get that extra hour by learning to manage themselves. I love to say, I'm not going to teach you necessarily how to manage other people. I am going to teach you how to manage you. And by doing that, and I know this is very much in your sweet spot as well, we're very aligned. Yes. And by doing so, it's, yes, you can reduce meetings by 10 or 20%. And yes, you can provide feedback in a more concise way. But it's really about eliminating all the qualifiers and the minimizing, and really learning how to trust and to build the deeper level of connections using professional vulnerability and being definitive, and providing what I like to call cookies, which are ways to really drive connectivity and trust, and then to remind yourself about how efficient it is. So I use this this tool called debits and credits, where it's no different than like in grade school when we learn accounting, where it's you get credits and debits like a bank account. When we do it right, we put credits in the bank, and when we don't, we just draw some credit, and we just want to be a little bit ahead. And the other key principle is there's no way that any of the tools, no matter what labels we put them on, how well we teach them, are going to be perfect. In fact, I don't even think the word perfect exists. But the idea here is to bring that levity to it. So, yeah, I just did that. Okay, I just cost myself 15 minutes, or I didn't really manage myself that well. And then lighten it up so much that it just becomes like yeah, that happened. And then we move on. No more swirling.
No more swirling. No more beating ourselves on the back, beating ourselves up. Well, you gave me a plug at the beginning of that I can't avoid just getting back into. So I'm going to do that. And then I want to come back to your tactics and talking about that. But anybody who knows me knows that I believe that the quality of the conversation is the game changer. When we upchange the quality of the conversation, we're getting everything we're looking for from a leader in leadership. And the quality of the conversation means I have to spend a little bit of thoughtfulness, both in how I manage myself and how I think about what I'm about to say, how I think about what my responsibility is and what I have to say. There's a whole mess of stuff in there. There's your 25th hour. Take that, invest it. You're going to save a boatload on the other time. But it's not about mine. It's about you. So I want to talk about these tactics. You have 4 that I am particularly a fan of. I think they're some of your favorites. We have this first question. Well, let's start with debits and credits. You started that. You named it. How does this actually work? Give me an example of how I would go about doing debits and credits.
Okay. So after I teach you the tool, which is similar to what I just described before, and after a little bit of trial and error, you have a simple notebook. It could be a piece of scrap paper. The form really doesn't matter. And you're noticing throughout your day when you are really focusing on being definitive and not swirling and pausing, figuring out the intent, asking a clarifying question, and just letting that flow work for you. And then recognizing how much time you save. So it would look something like this. So I just finished this meeting. It was scheduled for 30 minutes. It went 14 minutes. The reason it went 14 minutes is because I was extremely efficient with my opening, my closing, and managing the agenda. So I got 16 minutes back, plus the other 2 or 3 people in the room got 16 minutes back. So just using basic math, if there's 3 people in the meeting, that's 45 minutes of productivity back to the company. And you just put on your ledger, pen and paper or on a spreadsheet, however you want to organize it, plus 16 minutes in that example. And then perhaps later in the day, you've had a moment where you went, I kind of lost my way. I got a little intimidated. I was off my game. Yep, that happened. No big deal. I cost myself 10 minutes. Well, 16 minus 10, you're still plus 6. And at the end of the day, you're just looking at it. And we do a daily ledger. And then after some practice, we go into weekly. And then we start to look at week over week. And then it really becomes more of a mental as opposed to a physical logging, where at the end of each day, I still go, how'd I do today? And I'll take maybe 3 minutes and I'll just go, it was a great day. Not because I felt good, not because, and typically I do when I'm managing my time well, but how I'm modeling that behavior for other people. And as a leader, that's what we do. It's modeling behavior. And so when I'm being efficient and I'm on the plus column of my debits and credits, almost always religiously take it to the bank. That is exactly what is happening throughout the organization. And I have had countless experiences when I've taught senior leadership teams to go through this exercise where they'll go, you're not going to believe what happened. Like all of a sudden we were going to hire 3 more people and we don't need to because our productivity has soared. And I'll say, well, actually I do know what happened. And what winds up what we do is we have problems, so we hire more people, and it's like having kids. You got to clothe them, love them, and feed them. So as a manager, when you have more direct reports and more people to manage, it is a use of time. And so it's not just a capital resources commitment, it's a time resources commitment. And when we can streamline that, everything just becomes what I refer to as positive contagious.
Neal, I'm famous for saying I don't know how any of my clients make any money at all, given the inefficiency I see in the human behavior in the organization. So there we go as a testament. I think you're right that there are efficiency gains. Okay. So I love the simplicity of this, credits and debits, and just taking on a daily, or at least until you get used to it, kind of regular throughout the day. How did I do in that meeting? Did I run over? Did I run under? Did I take more time than I needed to get time back? Did I waste other people's time? Not waste other people's time? Could I have been more efficient? Not. It's like in retrospect, how am I doing? And then just accumulating that over the course of the day and taking a look. Did I win more than I lost, or vice versa? There's a consciousness that comes with that I promise will change behavior. And I know that's what you're seeing. Day in, day out, review systematically, you're going to see some changes. Okay, let's start with one of your tactics that adds to the credits column, which is called What's the Intent? Explain this tactic and how it works.
So I love that you picked up on the simplicity of it, because life is complicated, business is certainly complicated, and we tend to make it even more complicated than it needs to be. So back to that point about just simplifying and building some levity into the day-to-day, lightening it up really does help. So it goes like this. Somebody makes a comment to you, and your initial response is you're insulted. And before they've even finished the words out of their mouth, we are often responding in a very defensive way. And typically what'll happen is we get into this banter. It's even worse on text, email, or Slack, because it's less inhibited. We have less manners often in that way, and you can't interpret tone. And we just go back and forth and back and forth. And the idea is to pause and just go, what's the intent of that? Now, oftentimes the intent is really simple. It could be just the person wants to be seen. I see this all the time, especially with younger professionals that are constantly focused on trying to be seen by the more senior people, and senior people that don't make time or energy. So someone comes in to a more senior person's office and asks a question, and they didn't really need to ask the question, but they wanted FaceTime. And the senior manager is going, that's why are they asking me the question? Why are they wasting my time? I just spent 8 minutes talking to this person. And then they start swirling and they go, that person's probably not a great employee. Where really all their intent was some FaceTime with their boss. And so it would look like this. Someone walks into my office, they're speaking. Oftentimes I am not hearing them because I'm irritated. It was on scheduled meeting. It's distracting. I'm like, it's going to be 10 minutes out of my day that I'll never get back. And so I just solve for what's the intent. Okay, this person is just looking for what I like to say is cookies. They're looking for some affirmation or for some support. So about 20 seconds in, I've solved for the intent. I'll say quick timeout. Hey, what do you think we should do? Let me hear your idea in 1 minute or less. They say the idea. I say, go try it. They've then left fired up because they have the positivity and the attention from me. And they then go and share with other people. I had the best meeting ever with Neal or whoever the boss is. And that positive spreads versus the other scenario where you're just sitting there and you're being polite and minutes are ticking by and everyone keeps talking and we're accommodating each other. And so what's the intent? That's just one example of where solving for the intent quickly makes a lot of sense. Same thing in a board meeting. I love this. Board members always feel like they need to ask questions in order to be present and relevant. Sometimes senior leaders do the same thing in more middle manager meetings, whatever it may be. If we just know, the intent is just for them to feel visible, we can acknowledge the visibility without distracting a whole meeting and sending it in a rabbit hole. And so solving for the intent almost always saves enormous sums of time and just keeps everything very directed.
I think that if anything else, that's just worth the price of admission, that one thing right there. And I'm going to put it in my words because I have a new book coming out for anybody who hasn't seen the announcements, Take Charge of Your Career. One of the whole chapters is dedicated to understanding what story you tell yourself. Because part of the swirl that happens is the story I start telling myself. Why did Neal ask that question? What is that about? Is there something I missed? It's the swirl, in effect. And then I will tell all my friends this story that I have in my head. And then they have their opinion about Neal. And that creates a whole other set of swirls. And off we go infinitely. So it's sort of the secret of the drama triangle, if you will, if you go back to Cartman's original work. But by asking what's the intent, what it does is to stop me consciously from creating a story in my head and spinning on that one. But if I stop and ask, Neal, what's the intent? Or try to assess, Neal, what's the intent? Then I got a better shot at getting cleanly to an answer and providing an action and moving on without drama.
Wanda, that is literally my full belief system. And if we apply what we're both saying to my very early manager example where I swirled for 3 months, if I just figured out the intent, if I paused, what was her intent? Was she trying to insult me? I don't think so. I think, why would she want to insult her new boss? That wouldn't make any sense at all. Okay. Let me just ask a clarifying question. The whole thing would have taken about 15 to 20 seconds, including solving for the intent, asking the question, and listening to the answer. And I would have saved myself an enormous amount of time. But then here's what I also did, and I'll use this as the illustration to support your point. Every night during that 3-month period of time, at dinner with my new bride, my wife, I was saying, I'm not sure if I really like her, and I don't know if she's really good at what she does, and I'm starting to question what accounts I'm going to assign her. And I became punitive and distracted to the point where really my wife was like, can we talk about anything else at dinner but this one woman? It became almost an obsession for me to, one, not be powerful, but also for me to manage her. And had I just solved for the intent, it would have been lighthearted, easygoing, and I would have realized she was in again, a very beautiful way, paying me a compliment that I just wasn't trained to accept.
All right. So we've got this notion of creating a very simple, light ledger of credits and debits. One of the ways that I get credits is by a pause instead of swirling and ask what's the intent. Whether I ask it or just think it myself, I'm looking for their intent. Okay. Now, so that's going to give me credits. Love it.
Just to clarify, in most cases, the what's the intent question is asked between you and you. So in other words, when someone else is in their process, I am focused on thinking, what are we solving for here? What do they actually want? And typically in 5 to 15 seconds, I'm able to hone in on that. So I don't actually have to ask them what their intent is. I'm solving for what their intent is.
Do you ever recommend that you asking somebody?
When I can't solve it or when we can't solve it, yes, it's great to ask that question. Hey, I'd love to understand very specifically what you would like to achieve in this discussion or what your intent is of this discussion. And almost always people respond favorably to that. I do prefer if I can solve it myself, so then we can just keep the command of the conversation. Again, this is a tactic, whether you're a young professional or a very senior professional, it works the same. And when you understand the intent, it just makes things simpler.
Okay. All right. So I'm asking myself, what's the intent? Worst case scenario, I'm having that conversation with somebody else. Hopefully that's going to buy me back time. That time goes into the credits column. Okay. Now, next tactic that I love is called clarifying question. Okay. Explain how this one works.
So in my work, questions are the most powerful statements that we can make. So the idea of asking a clarifying question would look something like this. Let's say someone is presenting to me a concept or an idea that I don't agree with. And I think it's the wrong way to go, or it's not strategic, or whatever it is that I may have a response to. I know that if I give them a specific response and I am definitive about it, there's a very good chance they're going to swirl. And that's going to cost time and reduce productivity. So I like to do things like, and I teach my clients, and in the book you'll read about you did read about how the tactics to do this, which is just, so that's such an interesting way that you're approaching this. I'd love to understand why you think that will work. And if you notice the difference just with what I modeled, it's a simple question. You lead with a positive statement attached to the I'd love to understand. And that really does make a statement. So it's like, I don't get it, I don't understand it, I don't agree with it, is embedded there, but it is very inviting and it is non-swirl provoking. And so therefore, almost always with a series of simple questions like that, we can get to a conclusion quick. So you might respond, oh, well, what I was trying to accomplish is, and I then would respond back, oh, love that. I didn't pick that up quite the way you described it the first time. What if we tried it this way? And then you introduce the way you want it done. They feel like it's very productive, it's very collaborative, and you're using some professional vulnerability instead of just the command and control pound on the table to make it engaging, and you're avoiding swirl on both sides, and it winds up just being very positive. So that's one example of asking a clarifying question. It can be simpler than that as well, where it's just, hey, I don't understand. Please explain further. Or why would you think that is the best way to go about it? Or something in the spirit or tone of what I just described. Yeah.
I believe everybody needs to carry around 4 or 5 clarifying or questions, group question frameworks in their back pocket that they pull out on a regular basis when there's that moment and that you ask the question. And as you rightly point out in the book, and I believe as well, when you ask that question, it gives you a moment to think too. Before you go running off down your own swirl path, you've got a moment to say, okay, so what is your real concern here? Or, getting the sense that this doesn't land well with you. What is it that you didn't understand? Or any variations on that theme can help before you go into a swirl.
I agree. What I teach in the book and what I've been using in my practice for decades now is just pause. That's a very, very quick pause. Understand the intent and then just ask a question. And you're so right. Very often you are solving for the intent, as I described before, very quickly. You know it. Asking a question helps a ton and just gives a little bit more time to engage and make sure that we are doing this correctly. And that 30 seconds maximum between pause, solve for the intent, ask the clarifying question saves hours and hours of time.
My favorite, when an audience member comes at me with a really aggressive, critical question, my favorite response is, okay, fair. or some version of that, because usually there's some piece of truth in that, even if I don't completely agree with that. Why would you say that? Explain your thinking. What do you see? And I'll pick one version of that that's appropriate. And all I'm doing is giving me a moment to calm down so I don't go spinning off in a swirl. But also suddenly there's some part of what they're saying that I can then pick up, reinforce, and use to move to where I want to get them to go. It's just like this fabulous diffusing strategy.
Again, I agree with you completely. It is a frequent and daily occurrence in our practice with our clients, and that's just a representation of pretty much the world. And it is across languages and culture and male and female, so it has no gender bias. This concept of how we respond and the defensive nature of it. And just like you said, the natural instinct, and this happens to me all the time, people will say things and I want to grab them by the neck. What do you mean? That's not, that you're not understanding. I had this with my son just the other day. I was traveling and we were in different time zones, and I was exercising and I had something on my mind that I really wanted to share. And so I sent a text that was this long. It was like it was a very, very long, non-productive text, but I wasn't managing myself well at the moment. I was swirling and I wanted to get out of my head. And I was very clear to let him know that my intent was, I was very clear at the beginning. And then at the end, I repeated my intent. And the first thing he responded was, "Dad, I don't understand why you're getting so emotional about this." And then I responded, "I'm not emotional. What do you mean I'm emotional? I said twice, know my intent, and I gave you a heart and everything like that." And I realized that had I just paused and recognized with this particular one of my kids, I cannot text communicate with him. We are incredibly well connected verbally. We do not align in text communication. And I know that, and I lost my way. So I definitely had some debits in my column 2 days ago, which I had to pay myself back for. And the point of this is really, had I just said one question, which was, "Hey, what do you think about," without that entire long text, which over-explained, it would have been much easier. Or had I managed myself better in the concept of you manage you, I would have written myself a note and then called him when he was awake, time zone sensitized. It would have been a 1-minute conversation and very simple. Yeah.
As opposed to the text back and forth, the stewing, the swirling, he's swirling, you're swirling, and so on. I want to reinforce something you said in this one too, though, which is when you are the leader, particularly when you have more power in the organization, the words that you say and the way that you say it have enormous impact on people. And the greater the hierarchy difference, the stronger that one is. So any degree of criticism can, make people feel like they're a failure. So that asking that question, how does this impact this other thing, in a calm tone of voice, can keep people out of a swirl, help them think, perhaps get them to learn something in the process.
Absolutely. I have a case with a client who is a CTO of a very large company and was very close to terminating one of his best engineers because she was very defensive in all of their communication, and he just couldn't take it. In some way similar to what you described in the beginning of our conversation about that client with the 10%. Yeah. And the idea is to not to understand that person, understand the intent, and just ask a bunch of questions. What he noticed was that she responded really well to questions, because she felt involved and she didn't feel like he was being commanding and defensive. And their relationship changed inside of about 6 weeks. Today, he is now the COO of the company and she is promoted to the CTO of the company. And they work so beautifully well together. And it is a thriving business. And it's incredible. And it's really, he would tell you that it's learning to ask that question, understanding the intent, pausing, and just making the accommodation for the individuality of the person that you're dealing with. And to your point earlier, being the senior leader, we have to make the adjustments. We have to understand not just the intent, but the tone and the way we relate to people. That's our job.
Yes, and the way it is received from them as well, as I think, as you're rightly pointing out. Okay, I got to do one last tactic before we wrap up, which is, so we've got what's the intent, which I try to understand for myself, ask if I have to. That's going to keep me from swirling. I ask a clarifying question. That's going to keep me and perhaps the other person from swirling, all of which give me credits. Not doing that is going to give me debits. Now, yes. You have this last tactic. There are more than this, but the last one I want to talk about, 10% meeting rule. Explain this one.
Okay, so I came up with this because it's painful to sit in meetings, painful for me to sit in meetings that are just dragging on and unproductive, and people are talking to talk, and there's participants that were invited because they didn't want to hurt the business leader didn't want to, or the owner of the meeting didn't want to hurt the feelings of someone else. And so in meeting management that I teach, it's about inviting only the right people to the meeting, and you can explain to others in a very simple statement why that's not necessary. And when they understand and they're trained in this, they're relieved about it. But the 10% meeting rule as a whole goes like this. Every 60-minute meeting has to end at least 6 minutes early. And 6 minutes is a lot of time. It gives us an opportunity to use the restroom and get a snack, get some water. If we're working remote, sometimes it's letting the dog out, or it's just going outside and away from computer screen for a minute, and just getting a breath of fresh air. And that 6 minutes, or in the case of a 30-minute meeting, 3 minutes, is a reset that is mandatory. And it's often very easy to achieve because, and again, in the book, I teach about the way to run meetings with a quick check-in and professional vulnerability, and we know where everyone's head's at. The idea of, so how was your weekend? And then 2 or 3 people engage in a conversation about, this past weekend, we saw July 4th fireworks and it was great. Oh, I was there too. Did you see so-and-so? And we're taking up a room of 10 people's time when that could be handled separate. We get right into the meeting agenda, the meat of the agenda, and we get out as quickly as we can. And then afterwards, if someone wants to spend their 10% of time talking about the 4th of July fireworks or whatever their weekend activity was or what they're doing that night or whatever it may be that's interesting, I welcome that because I love that connection and that camaraderie. It just may not be applicable to the entire room. So the net of it is every single meeting has to end 10% early. And as my clients master this, it typically is somewhere closer to 20 to 30% early. Not every meeting, but most meetings, especially weekly one-on-ones and those weekly recurring meetings that become very mundane and repetitive. When we are mindful of the 10% meeting rule, which again could be even more than 10%, it's a massive amount of time back to the company.
I love that, particularly for the repetitive meetings, because I think you're right. Those are the ones where we sort of feel like we're supposed to. We don't really get as much value out of them, don't really enjoy them. We end up canceling them any rate. So just making those manageable. And I would just add, Neal, for some people, that 10 minutes or 5 minutes actually of chit chat at the beginning is really how they calm down, build trust, and it's useful. But then that has to go into the meeting agenda as part of the planned time because Absolutely. It's useful for the outcome of that meeting. Okay, check. Next.
So I'm telling you, I work with a very large healthcare company CEO. She is a wonderful human. And this was one of the toughest tools for her to implement because she felt that she was going to really hurt the feelings of there's 10 of them in their weekly leadership meeting. So their Monday morning meeting, it goes from 9 to 10. And she felt like if we cut 10% out, then she was going to really affect the culture of that meeting. So gradually, we implemented the quick check-in. That's the vulnerability part. We introduced the 10% meeting rule. And we, instead of each person giving 6-minute update on their respective department and respective group, she removed the time cap, because if you give someone 6 minutes, they're going to take 6 minutes. She removed the cap, and we calibrated that to say, everyone share the 3 to 5 key highlights or new data points this week only. And if you don't have it, it is acceptable to say, here's one, or I passed this week, or whatever it may be. The 1 hour meeting turned into, it's done now in about 25 minutes. There's then a little bit of that closing. I help them do a closing at the end of the meeting because now there's time. So it's roughly 30 minutes shorter times 10 people. That's 300 minutes of productivity just by doing things differently every week, just amongst 10 people. Those 10 people are basically running the company, meaning everyone else in the company reports up somehow through them. They've now modeled that throughout the entire company. So the entire productivity system of this healthcare company is unbelievably and measurably more productive just as a result of modeling from the Monday morning meeting.
Yeah. Well, we could talk about meetings for a really long time because there is so much productivity gain to be had in meetings, and it's such simple changes, at least that I see. But I love this 10%, but that means I have to structure the meeting to accomplish the agenda of the meeting, not just a running list of, geez, it would be nice to talk about. I'm intentionally, as a leader or the owner of the meeting, structuring it and then holding people to that structure.
Just by virtue of what you described, the awareness around attempting to reduce every meeting by 10% will drive productivity enormously. And therefore modeling that behavior and being definitive in meetings and the other meeting tactics that I talk about in the book are enormous contributors to growth for companies.
I just have to make this one comment. I have a client that drives me bananas because they always insist that you start 5 minutes late. That's where they get their 5 minutes on everything, which is fine. I love that. No problem with that whatsoever. Several clients do that. The problem is they don't structure the meeting so that I can now accomplish it. And so there'll be heavy meeting topics that take some debate to get a resolution on that can't be done in the time that's now allotted. So you got to plan your meeting accordingly for the purpose you need to have, and then take 10% off.
You have to have an agenda. I really, I'm fascinated by how many meetings take place around the world where people come in and they're, so what are we talking about today? We're unclear, and it doesn't work. It's wildly unproductive.
Tell me about it. Okay. All right, Neal. What a great conversation. I have a feeling we could talk for the next 2 hours. So my guest today is Neal Schore. The book is called The 25th Hour, How to Thrive and Gain Ridiculous Amounts of Time by Getting Out of Your Own Way. Neal is currently founder and CEO of the 25th Hour Group, if you want to reach out to him. My takeaways from this, Neal, are stop your own personal swirl. You will save yourself enormous amounts of time, and you save other people time. You're going to do that by paying attention to the debits and credits of how you're using your time. You're going to gain credits by asking, what's the intent? by asking a clarifying question and by operating with a 10% meeting rule. Buying minutes back out of every single routine meeting, that's going to add up to a lot by the end of the day. Do that systematically, day in and day out, week in and week out. I think you're going to develop some new habits. So Neal, thank you for being a guest today.
Thank you, Wanda. Thank you so much. What a great conversation. And I agree, I could talk to you for hours.
Absolutely. And we'll have to do that another occasion. Thanks, Neal. For everybody else who want to watch us, check out the YouTube channel at outofthecomfortzone.com. And if you are one of those people who has never had a swirl, we really want to hear from you. Go to outofthecomfortzone.com and send us an email. We'd like to hear your thoughts. Until next week, here's getting out of your comfort zone.